Okay, good morning. So we are doing today, happening today, some of Gimel at Aleph, and I'm starting. We are up to Beis and Beis, um, in the wide lines, about 3 lines down from the start of the wide line. The Gemara says Masnisim. Yeah. So what we it's a bit of a new Gemara, not so connected to I guess the day before Tisha B'av. So what we did on Wednesday says Gemara Masnisim Deloiki Haitana. Our Mishnah is not like this Tana. So if you open up the 6 steps in the back of the Gemara, you'll see that there's another opinion in Rabbi Lezer. We had the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer holds that the Kana Alpi what Alpi Shnaim Mamashka Alpi Eidefet Alpi Atzmai. That's what the Gemara said in terms of the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. And now in the Tosefta we say another opinion in Rabbi Lezer. Right? What is the new opinion of Rabbi Lezer? Says the Gemara. Masnis Mloiki Aitana, the Tanya, because we learned in the Tosefta as follows: Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, Aimer, Mishum, Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda said in the name of Rabbi Lezer, Mekana Lishta, Mekana Al Pied Echad Al Piatzmai. A person who wants to Mekana his wife is able to Mekana Al Pied Echad or Al Piatzmai. In other words, what we thought was the opinion of Rabbi Lezer that said that a person is able to Mekana his wife Al Pishnayim and then Mashker Al Pied Echad Al Piatzmai is switched. In this opinion of Rabbi Lezer, in this opinion of Rabbi Lezer, we have essentially a person saying that Rabbi Lezer holds differently, that the kinoi doesn't need to have 2 people. The kinoi is able to be done by himself or with one aid. That's this opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda in Rabbi Lezer. Again, the Tanya, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, I'm Mishra, Rabbi Lezer, Mekana Leishtoi. Someone's doing kinoi on his wife, Mekana Al Pied Echad, Al Pias, is able to do so by himself or with the opinion of one aid, or Mashkel Al Pishnayim. But he needs to have 2 witnesses to get her to actually drink. So there, continuing now in the Tosefta, Hishivu Chachamim. The Tosefta continues and says that the rabbis responded to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda's opinion in Rabbi Lazar and said as follows: Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, Ein L'Davar Seif. According to this opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, there's no end to the matter. What do you mean there's no end to the matter? It means that essentially a person gets angry at his wife because he sees that she's closeted herself with somebody and say, "Oh, I gave you this warning so many times not to be with this guy," and essentially the matter can potentially have no end. You can always get angry and claim that you had already done a kinoi. The bar, remember what we said, the Machlis from Bishum Blazer was that the bar to get a woman to drink was higher for Rabbi Shua because it required 2 Adam on the Hashka, and according to Rabbi Blazer, only 1. What we're saying now is that the Chacham are responding to Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Blazer and saying, well, if you're saying that the kinoi could even be done al pi 8 echad, again, the Hashka, according to this opinion, will require 2. But just to get into this conversation, anytime a guy gets angry because he sees his wife was closeting herself, he'll say he already did a kinoi, and then you have 2 Adam who said that she closeted herself, and so it's a lot easier to get her to drink. So, Ein L'Davar Seif, in the sense, is that the matter could just go out of control. Anytime a person's angry, he could say he already did a kinoi, and since you have Adam now on this stira, they would make her drink. Says the Gemara, my time of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda. What is the reason? So now we're done with the price. The Gemara is now asking, my time of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda. What's the reason of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda that he feels that when it comes to the kino, you don't need to have 2 Adim. Just simply having 1 aid or by himself is sufficient. Remember what we did on Wednesday, right? We said, how do you darshan ba? Right? The pasuk said, "Ve'aid ein ba." Right? She was not forced. There was the aid ain't but there was no aid. And we darshan, but you don't need to have an aid when it comes to tuma, when it comes to actually active intimacy. But according to Rabbi Lezer, but you do need to have aid when it comes to the warning. Whereas according to Rabbi Shua, we're going out, but by the act of intimacy, you don't need to have 2 Adim. But when it comes to the act of kinoi and the act of stira, according to Rabbi Shua, you need 2 Adim for both of those. So now the Gemara is asking, how does Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda know that when it comes to kinoi, 1 aid or himself is sufficient? And now the Gemara says he darshans ba also ba v'loy b'stira. In other words, not Bavalai Bikina, the Rebbe Lezer said before. If you look at the two dots before we said my time to Rebbe Lezer says Bavalai Bikinoi. Now we're not saying that. Bavalai Bikini means they needed two Edim for the Bavalai Bikini means you need one. You don't need any two Edim when it comes to the act of Tumah itself. But not the other case. Only because remember if you look at there in the pasuk it says the aid ain ba v'hilon nisbasa, that means we're talking about the actual ma'isa of intimacy. So the aid ain ba, we're saying that there was no aid, and we talked already before. What does it mean? Two, one, etc. But it's just over there they don't need to aid them. But when it comes to the kina and the steer according to Rabbi Shua, or the kina according to Rabbi Lezer, that is how we understood where you would need to aid them. And now Rabbi Yisrael is turning it on its head. He's saying, what does it mean ba? But by the act of intimacy, you don't need to aid them. That's true. But you do need it by the stira. By the kina, according to Rabbi Yisrael and the name of Rabbi Lezer, you do not need to have to aid them. So again, my time Rabbi Yisrael Buddha Markov Stira. That's how he learns it out. It says the Mabema Bav Bikinoi. Maybe he should like the other opinion of Rabbi Lezer, the simple opinion of Rabbi Lezer that we had in the mission that Ba is Darshan Bav Bikinoi. That Ba by intimacy you don't need to have to aid him, but you do need to aid him when it comes to the Kinoi itself. So no, Kinoi is Tuma. Kinoi has a hekish to Tuma. What do you mean Kinoi has a hekish to Tuma? Because if you look in the pasuk, you'll see that well, with the Chumashma, of course, but if somebody can grab me a Chumash, you'll see that the pasuk says over there that both, and we already pointed out in the Gemara. If you remember, the Gemara said v'nistra v'hinitma, and the Gemara said, and the pasuk said v'kineas ishta v'hinitma. So there were two sukkim where you see kinoi. Thank you. You see kinoi and stira where it's related to seemingly compared with tuma. So the Gemara is asking on Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Huda, in the name of Rabbi Lezer, why are you saying Bavalai Bikinoi? I'm sorry, that Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Huda is saying Bavalai Bistira. The Gemara is asking, why do you say Bavalai Bikino the same way we say by Rabbi Lezer? The way we just said it before in the Mishnah to explain Rabbi Lezer, that he holds Bavalai Bikinoi, whereas Rabbi Shua holds Bavalai Bikinoi and Bavalai Bistira. So the Gemara says no, because Kina is Ishkish Latuma. Because Kina is actually compared to Tuma. Why? The civic Kina is Ishta, Hinit Ma. Says no, that's not a good enough reason. The same way we said last time is Tiranami Ishkish Latuma, the civic is Hinit Ma. If you look in Pashas now, so you'll see over there that both of these, both Kina and Stira, seem to be talking about comparison with them and Tuma. The pasuk says, I'm reading it here from Pashas Nasai. The pasuk says, "Ish ishki sisteshtoi mala vaymal," a woman, right, who has committed an act of wrong over here. V'shacham ish oisa shich vazer v'nelam eni shem nisra v'yidin ma. Right, she was closeting herself up and she became tamei. So you see, Tuma and Stira are in the same pasuk. You see that they're connected. And the next pasuk says, "Va'avar lav rakina v'kines ishtai v'hinit ma." And there was a kina and his wife, and she became tamei. So you see again that the act of intimacy and the act of kina are connected. So the Gemara is asking on Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Huda, the name of Rabbi Lezer, you're telling me that you're saying you want to darshan bavalei b'stira. Why? Because you're saying that stira is connected to the act of intimacy, but kina is also. There's no difference between kina and stira. They're both connected to tuma. So if that's the case, then why are you dashing it that way? Says the Gemara. So then we're up to the answer of the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Ahu lekama shiur stira kidei tuma huda asa. Says the Gemara, no. When we are saying that the tuma is compared to the stira, that is to teach you the amount of time that it would be to answer somebody up and make her have to drink is the same like we say by Maisa Tuma. You understand? So we're able to say we're able to say that when we're gonna darshan out how many Edom is required, so the Gemara says again, why is Rabbi Lezer, in the opinion of Yosef Rabbi Huda, going to say that by Kina 1 aid or by himself is sufficient? Why don't you say like the regular sheet of Rabbi Lezer that 2 Edom was sufficient? I'm sorry, the 2 Edom was required. So the Gemara answered because he holds Bavalei b'stira. It's only knocking out that where you need to have 2 Edom by stira, but by Kina you don't need it. So the Gemara says Ve'ema Bavalei b'Kina, but maybe Buzz coming to knock out Kina also. Says the Gemara, Kina iskish l'tuma. Kina is compared to tuma, so tuma is 1 aid is enough. So kina is 1 aid is enough. What's the comparison? The civic in so the most I don't understand. Stiranami is the civic. So what's the difference? It's also compared to Tuma. So by Tuma is one. So by Stira it should be one. Says the one, no. That pasuk of Venistra Vehinit Ma is Hahu Lakama Shir Stira Kadei Tumud Asa. That's not teaching you that just like one aid's enough by Tuma, one aid's enough by Stira. No, that pasuk is there to teach you how long does it have to be a Stira in order to be a situation where she would now be drinking. I was saying that shear is a shear of Kedei Tumah. So that's not there to teach you a comparison between Tumah and Stira that you should now be saying that one aid is enough for Stira. To have her to drink, one aid will be sufficient. No, that comparison there of Stira and Tumah is there just to teach you how long of Stira does there need to be before we say that she's going to have to drink. Which then means that Ba is not going to come and knock out the kinoi and require that to be two edim. It's just Ba v'loy b'stira. Ba v'loy b'stira, only by Tuma is required one aid, but by Stira you would need two edim according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, in the name of Rabbi Lezer. Says the Gemara. Okay, so now I understand the opinion of Rabbi Yosef in the name of Rabbi Lezer, how it got to be that Kina requires one aid and Stira requires two aidim. I understand that. It says the Gemara, but I don't know what's the second part. The rabbis responded to Rabbi Yosef and said, what are you talking about? If you're going to go in this manner, there's not going to be any end to sort of making women be saitas. Essentially, anytime you have a woman who has aroused the ire of her husband, all of a sudden he could say, I was mekana you. And since he has now two Adam on some class, when she was closeting herself, and he says, I was mekana her already, I already gave her a warning. So, you can always be, making women be forced to drink. Says the Gemara, mind you, what does it mean, Ein L'davar Seif? The Zimnan Deloikani, V'Amerkana, he's going to be times when he wasn't really mekana. He didn't do that. He just got angry. He saw she was clousing herself. There were Adam now. He said, I already was mekana you before. Says the Gemara, 1 second. That's a good reason because he's going to get angry at her when she sees her closeting up and he has, some witnesses there to that effect. He says, oh, it's mekana you once. That's what we're really afraid of? Says the Gemara. What about our Mishnah? We had a different opinion of Rabbi Lezer. What is the opinion of Rabbi Lezer in our Mishnah? The opinion of Rabbi Lezer in our Mishnah is that by Stira, he doesn't need to have two Adim. One Aid or himself is sufficient. So there it's L'davar Seif. That's normal. So yeah, he did a real kinoi. But then he's going to be forcing her to drink without Adim. Says the Gemara, there could be times when she wasn't really closeting herself and she wasn't really deserving of drinking. He's going to say no. Why? Because you're mehem and him al piatzmai. So why is one more ein l'davar seif than the other one? So this is the Gemara's question on the Tosefta. In other words, the Tosefta, as the rabbis respond to basically in the name of Rabbi Lezer and saying, Ein l'davar seif, according to your opinion. The Gemara is now asking, or as we like to say, post our Sunday shiurim, the stam of the Talmud is asking, what do you mean? Ein l'davar seif. Why is that more ein l'davar seif than the Mishnah is ein l'davar seif? Both of them, once you let the husband do something and he believed on his own, so he could be abusing that privilege when it comes to kinoi, or he could be abusing that privilege when it comes to stira. There's no fundamental difference as to why one would be, that's very clear, that's for sure, the husband going to be more abusive of one privilege over the other. They both seem equal. On that, the Gemara says, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Rav Yochanan. Rav Yosef is saying the name of Rabbi Yochanan to explain this Gemara's question on the Tosefta. Af l'div Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda ein l'davar seif. No, it's not to say that the Mishnah is ein l'davar seif. The Mishnah is also going to be a case of ein l'davar seif. Even in the Mishnah, the husband could do things with regards to the stira that will not be appropriate. When he gets angry, he could say things and you would believe him because it's al piatzmai. So even according to Rabbi Lezer, there's a danger of abuse by the situation of the Mishnah. And you could say ein l'davar seif according to that. But what we're saying is, even according to the Tosefta, which has a different opinion of Rabbi Lezer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, over there also you could say Ein Lo Davar Seif. Over there also there could be abuse of the privilege on the kinoi aspect. So that's the Gemara's answer. Says the Gemara now. Again, the Stamad of Talmud says, what? How does that make sense? That you're saying even over there in the Tosefta, in other words, now our question is moved to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, you're now explaining what did the Tosefta mean when it said Ein Lo Davar Seif? You're saying even over there in the Tosefta, the husband could abuse his privilege. Even over there, that's Rabbi Yochanan's big chiddush that even in Tosefta found that if you say Kina is Alpi Atzmei, Alpi Eid that there the husband can abuse the privilege. Even there. Like, it's mashma that, like, you would have thought, no, but even over there you could say it. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? So says the Gemara, well, you're saying like even in a Tosefta, there could be an abuse of the privilege. But like the Mishnah is less. What are you talking about? Adarabba, the Mishnah sayinu ikar. Hasam like ikar. Right? In the Mishnah, there's a situation where at least, what you have was an ikar. What do you mean an ikar? You already had two Eidim who came for the kina, according to the Mishnah's understanding of Rebbe Lezer. So over there, yes, can the husband abuse their privilege by the stira, by saying himself when he got angry something? Yes, it's true. But what's about the case of the Tosefta? In the case of the Tosefta, there's no ikar. There was not even a real kinoi. The husband's doing it after the fact when he sees that she's classing herself. So, in other words, the Gemara is suggesting that at least in the Mishnah, it had to start out appropriately. It had to start out with two Eidim. So it's true, it could be abused. But you wouldn't use the lashon that even in a Tosefta, you could say that the husband would abuse the privilege. Over there, that is literally when it's going to be abusing the privilege. By him claiming there was a kinu when there was no kinui. But in our Mishnah, understanding of Rabbi Lezer, there is some less likelihood of abuse. Why? Because at least over there, the kinu had to be with two Eidim. That's the Gemara's understanding right now. So in other words, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who's being quoted by Rabbi Yosef to explain the Tosefta, which quoted Rabbi Yosef Rabbi the name Rabbi Lezer, it's a lot of different quotes, but we are saying af. The word af is what's bugging us. And that af over there is Ein Lo Davar Seif. And now we're saying, what do you mean? Why saying that it's af al Rabbi Yosef Rabbi the Mishnah Senu? Adar Rabbi Mishnah Senu Ikar Hasam like Ikar. Says the Gemara. I'll try again. Eli Imar Hachi Idmar. Let's try it like this. Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan. L'diber Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. According to the words of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda in the Tosefta, that was explaining the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. Af Mishnah Seinu Ein Lo Davar Seif. According to him, that he says his opinion that the husband is able to be mekaner al pi hadachar al pi hatzmai. According to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, Rabbi Lezer, he held that even the Mishnah is Ein Lo Davar Seif. It's true. Could the husband abuse the privilege by kinoi? Yes, he can. But he held, the basic root of the name of he held that the husband, in the Mishnah, which says that kinoi required too, he can also abuse the privilege. How? By the stira, by only requiring himself or an eid echad, that could also be subject to abuse. So in other words, the af that we thought Rabbi Yochanan was saying himself about the Tosefta comes out really. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't saying it about the Tosefta. It was really Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda in the Tosefta saying it about the Mishnah that's also subject to abuse. Don't say that opinion of Rabbi Lezer is better than my opinion of Rabbi Lezer. Both of them are subject to abuse. And that is the conclusion of this bit of the Gemara. So I just want to mention before we go any further a couple of things. Number one, we have the Tosefos here on Beis. We didn't have a chance to do it last time. The second Tosefos. Tosefos says Yerushalmi. The whole Tosefos here is based on the Yerushalmi. There's a couple of points I just want to take out quickly from the Tosefos. One is the Tosefos says my time is Rabbi Shua. So the Yerushalmi brings down another reason. We had said we darshan the pasuk here of Eid Ein Ba V'Hila Nisbas, and we darshan according to Rabbi Shua Ba V'Lei B'Stir Ba V'Lei B'Kino. That's what we darshan according to our Gemara. But the Yerushalmi has a different pasuk. The pasuk was Umatzah Ba Ervas Davar, right? Umatzah Ba Ervas Davar, and the darshan over there that what is Ervas Davar is obviously stira. Ervas Zu Astira, Davar Zu Akinoi. And therefore, since both of those are being talked about, erva and davar, one is kin and one is stira, v'alfin and davar, we already have the gzer shava that just like by davar, by mamnas requires pishnayim edim, so too, right, pishnayim edim yakum davar, so too when it comes to matzah ervas davar, it requires two edim. Again, ervas davar, ervas kino, ervas stira, and kinoi is davar. So you're required to, and that will be the opinion of Rabbi Shua based upon the way the Yerushalmi understood it. And then he continues quoting again from the Yerushalmi. What about Rabbi Huda? He says, "Mashkel pishnayim because nemer ki matzah ve'imitzia b'chamok me'alapi edim." So according to that understanding was that how to explain Rabbi Huda that says that the hashka has to be on two, because the mitzia requires two edim. Fine. Then the last bit of text, which is what I want to get to, which we will need for the next Gemara, is the following. Says text. I also found in the Yerushalmi as follows. That when it says that the pasuk tells them Parashat Nasai, before a man's going to do kina on his wife, it passes on him a spirit of kina, and he is mekana his wife. Says the Taisus, according to the Yerushalmi. What does that mean? Let me talk Kalasrich, let me talk Geos. Person is not supposed to mekana his wife out of joking. It's not like a jokey thing to do. Let me mekana you, don't hang out with this guy. No, that's not an appropriate way to do it. And not me talk Geos, not like gaiva, super haughty. And also not me talk, Kalasrich, no levity, right? Let me talk davar shel ema. It should be done with a certain fear, a certain, I don't know what ema is, a certain feeling of awe. Yeah, a certain feeling of awe. A certain feeling of awe. And that's how he should do the kina. Okay, now we're going to have to move on. Just want to point out one thing about this ein l'davar safe. This is a thing that we find one other time in the Mishnah, and that is in the beginning of Yuma. The Mishnah tells us over there about the different things you have to be worried about the Kohen Gadol. So there's a machlokes there in the Mishnah whether or not you're supposed to be preparing a second wife for the Kohen Gadol in case his wife dies, because the pasuk says that if he doesn't have a wife, he needs to have a wife. So, the same way we have a skan Kohen Gadol, we have a Kohen Gadol, and you have a number two, a spare. So you should have a spare wife just in case he's. I remember the Kohen Gadol is very complicated. Who he's allowed to marry? It's not so simple. I can't get into more now, but it would be a bit of a process. You have to find somebody. So the Gemara response to this opinion, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, says, no, imkain ein l'davar seif. Right? What do you mean ein l'davar seif? And over there, it means that if you're going to end up saying you need to have a spare wife, so maybe you should have a second spare wife, just in case the first spare wife goes and the wife goes, then you should have, then if you want to be worried about these kinds of matters, essentially, ein l'davar seif, you can always be finding things to worry about. Yeah. But obviously over here in our context of ein l'davar seif, it's not exactly the same. We're saying ein l'davar seif is a concern. And so we end up saying, yes, there is a concern. The best way to read the Tosefta, according to the Gemara concludes, is to read when the Tosefta says, Hashiva chacham ein l'davar seif, it does mean ein l'davar seif, according to the way Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Huda was learning Rabbi Lezer. Don't say my opinion is going to cause more problems than the other opinion Rabbi Lezer will be having in our Mishnah, which also will cause problems. Good. That's the Gemara until now. Says the Gemara, Amar Chini Misura, Le'lema inish le'itse b'zman hazeh le'tistri b'hadi plani. A person should not say b'zman hazeh, don't not class yourself up with this person. Don't mekana like Rabbi Lezer, because maybe we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Kinal Piatzman says that you are able to mekana just by yourself and with one aid. Mitzran should become closeted with this man. And so now she will be required to drink the Meisarta. Presumably, again, there was two witnesses for the stira, and now there's no Meisarta to check her out. Because Leila is Lila Island, and she will now become us them forever and ever. Now, there's a number of things to say about this. Number one, the first thing I'll mention is where do we have Mchinim Misura? For those who are here on the classes when we did on Sunday a couple of years ago when we focused on the Akuna. So the Mark Super Sama Gimel tells us about whether or not a woman who says Mo'asalai is entitled to getting a divorce. It's Machlokes there in the Gemara. According to Memra, she is. Rambam, the Rif, all those Ga'anim, Rishayim, etc. who pass like that. We don't pass like we pass like we don't necessarily pass like Marzutra either. We don't pass like Memra that she's entitled to a divorce, and we forced the husband to give her a get. Marzutra disagrees. Marzutra said just we are kaifina law. We force her to stay there. Just because she says Moslai, she is condemned to live with the person who she hates. That was the opinion of Mar Zutra. So the Mar says a story that there was a woman who said Moslai about her husband, and Mar Zutra forced her to stay with her husband, even though she hated him. And she had a child. And who is that child? From Chanina Misura. This man was not appeared that many times in Shas. Here he is. Says the Gemara, therefore that should be a raya that you see that you should force a woman to be able to stay with her husband even though she hates him, and you don't say Mosalai is a right for divorce. Says Marna, no raya from this story. You know why? Because Siyaz the Shmaya. The more the Dharam Chav tells us that a woman is not, you're 100% not allowed to be intimate with your wife if you're upset at her, if she's upset at you. This is called B'nai Meriva, B'nai Tata. These are kinds of one of the 9 types of terrible situations. One of them is the child from a machlekes. So obviously, the proof that the more wants to bring, you see, it was clearly he became a great rabbi. Obviously, there was no problem. The marriage worked itself out. Even though she hated him, she was forced to stay with him, and so she ended up liking him. Says the more, it's no raya. Siyaz d'shmaya, was some special siyaz d'shmaya in that case, and that's why it happened. But you can't bring a raya anywhere else that message will be correct. Anyhow, my point is that what's very interesting to me is that B'china Misura is so mamish concerned about shalom bias that he says a person nowadays cannot do kinei on his wife because of the fact that there is no way to resolve the situation. If you're Mekani your wife, and then there will be a situation where she was say to herself, and there was an Edom that said, she could be also Israel, there's no Meisait anymore. You can never clear up the matter. So in order to keep marriages, without having these problems, he is encouraging very strongly not to be doing kinei on one spouse. The Shulchan Aruch brings it down the halacha. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch in Even Ezra and Kufay and Ches, so the Shulchan Aruch brings it down the halacha. And if you look on the side of the Gemara, check on your Gemara, you'll see that it says the Torah, right? It says the Torah, which means Shulchan Aruch is bringing down, yeah? That's probably what you have there. Probably nobody has in their fancy new Gemaras than Ein Mishma, which brings down the Rambam, right? The Rambam doesn't say anything about this. If you go in Hilchos Sotah, the Rambam doesn't say anything about this. He does, but maybe I'll get to that later. Why is they not bringing down the Rambam? This is only halacha word down Shulchan Aruch. I'll tell you what the Torah quotes this Gemara, and the Shulchan Aruch condenses it down. And the Ramah writes that if a person is Mekani his wife, he should be mindful her. He should say, no, I retract my kinoi in order to avoid this problem. Yeah, that's brought down. The Ram doesn't bring it down. So why did the Ram bring it down? And why did the Torah decide to go like this way and the Shulchan Aruch and the Ram not? So I think the answer is that the Rambam didn't agree that it's not that he didn't agree that this wasn't an issue. In fact, he holds it's an issue, and he doesn't say that you shouldn't do it. To the contrary, if you look in Hilchos Ishus, Perak Chav Dal Halach Chav Hey, the Rambam writes over there. It's interesting that it's not in Hilchos Sotah, right? You won't find it in Hilchos Sotah. That's why they don't catch it here. It's in Hilchos Ishus. In the end of Hilchos Ishus, the second to last paragraph, the Rambam writes that a person who is Mekana, his wife, Beinoi Leveina, just him, no Adam, that she would become Aser. In other words, the Rambam is being Chayshesh for this Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda's opinion of Rabbi Lezer, that Kinoi al pi atzmai is going to Aser up. That is a real Kinoi. And he doesn't say, oh, don't do it bisman azeh because of the problem of B'china Misura. Like, oh, you're going to cause a lot of kata. There's no way to clean her out with the Meiseta. He doesn't. He just said it's Aser. So he doesn't go with B'china Misura. That's the reason why he's not going to be brought down here. And he is chayshish for this idea of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda says that if someone's mekana al pi eidach, al pi atzmai, that would in fact could be considered a good kinoi. Now, whether or not the Rambam holds that you really should do that, we'll get to hopefully in a few minutes. Let's see, but we gotta move. So start the Gemara. What is the lashon of kinoi? Something that causes kinoi, that causes anger, causes annoyance between her and others. What do you mean? Alma says the Gemara he must hold in the name of Rabbi Lezer that kinoi just from him to her is sufficient. Why? Because no one knows that he was mekana her because there was no Adam that was schmoozing about it. It was just him to her. in the privacy of their own home. The Amri Maidakama, and then she's going to go, and be approached by the normal men that she was hanging out with and schmoozing with, and they're going to say to her, Maidakam the Kabbalah. They're going to say, why are you like not talking to us anymore? And then they're going to get angry at her because they won't know that there was a kinoi because the kinoi happened privately. But that's the reason why she's now no longer going to be talking to them. So you see, says the Gemara, to Reish Lakish, that there could be those that are passing on basically Rabbi Huda that hold that kinoi alpi atzmai is going to work. Then is the Gemara Rabbi Yemer bar Rav Shlema Mishmeda Baya Amar Davar Ametel Kinoi Beinoi Leveina. What does it mean? What does it mean when we're talking about this kinoi? What does it do? Reish Lakish said that it's something that brings a kinoi between her and others. It says Abai, no, it's something that brings a kinoi between her and him, between the spouses. So what does that mean if you say it's a kinoi between the spouses? Alma kasavar kinoi pishnayim edem. It means that he holds a baya that you really need two edem for the kinoi because the fight is going to be between the spouses, right? Not between others. Why? Others are not going to be upset. The kule alma yadid. Everyone knows the edem went on shmoozy. So we were just brought into Yadim's house. Yeah, you wanted to be kind of her, and he brought us in to be edem. So they're going to go and tell everybody about it. So now the men who would normally schmooze with her are not going to schmooze with her because they know that he was Mekaner al Piedim. So you see, according to the way Abaya holds, that his understanding in Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shua, is that you require two Eidim for the kinoi. And that's why it's something that's going to cause anger between him and her and not between others and her. Right? In Reish Lakish's way of understanding that it caused anger between others and her, that's because others don't know about it. The kin is not being done al Piedim, it's being done privately. But according to Abaya, that the king is creating anger between him and her, the others are not going to be angry at her because everyone knows that he was Mekaner because he brought in the Eidim and the Eidim wanted to told everybody. So says the Gemara, according to B'yem Rashlema Mishmeda, my Amar Davar Metal Kinah Ben Olavein, Al Maksav Kinah Pishneim, Eidim Kuli Al Miyad the Kan. Everyone knows. V'Iu Hu does and Levi Kinah Bad, and he's the one who's making the anger between him and her. They're going to obviously not have their issues are not resolved. Yeah, so continues the Gemara. Al Makasavri da Asulakani. Says the Gemara, it sounds like from both of these opinions, both Abaya and Reish Lakish, we're now in Gimel and Aleph on the top. Sounds like, says the Gemara, from these opinions, that both Reish Lakish and Abaya say that you really shouldn't be Mekana. Why not? Because you see, it's causing anger. It's causing problems. Either it's causing between the spouses or causing between the others and her. But either way, it's causing problems. So it says it's much from here. They really are not supposed to be mekan unless obviously you're going to have a very, very, very good reason. According to my number holds that it's mutter to do kina. In other words, that it's not going to say that it's something that one has to be avoided unless it's absolutely required. So according to him, what does kina do? What does kina mean? Right? According to this Tanakh, it means that it's bringing anger, it's bringing hatred. But according to the Madam, it's mutlakanis, then what is lashon kinoi? Amar Menachem Bar Yitzchak, and kinoi el lashon asra. Kinoi means it's a warning. It's a warning. It's not something that's bringing anger. It's a warning. Says the Gemara, Hashem la'artzi pasuk in Yoel, that Hashem was mekana to his land, and therefore was actually had rachmanas on the land. So it's being used here in a different way. But the way the pasuk there in Yoel uses it is that Hashem had kinoi for his land, and then ends up forgiving and bringing back the people, the food, etc. Says the Gemara, Tanya, hi Rabbi Meir Eimer. Adam Iver Aver B'Seisev HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ma'achaz Olav V'Gali. A person attempts to commit a sin privately, and Hashem makes it public. Shneimar, like the pasuk says, V'Avar Allah Ruach Kina. Right? It passed on the person a Ruach Kina. Ve'ein Avera Ela Lashon Hachraza. And Avera here is a warning. Shneimar V'Yitzav Meish or publicization. Shneimar V'Yitzav Meish V'Yavir Kol HaMachane. If you remember, by the Truma, after the Jews had brought all the gifts to the Mishkan, so please stop bringing. There's enough stuff. It's the only stuff campaign in history like that, right? Please don't bring any more. We're good. So in that situation, it was a publicization. It was making a kol karev. Please don't bring any more. So again, the opinion here, this Bryce of our mayor saying that a person does an avera quietly, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu publicizes it, Shenemar v'avar lav ruach kina, right? The kina here is a language of publicization, right? The woman is hanging out, closeting herself, and acting inappropriately. So v'avar lav ruach kina is going to be publicizing that. Ve'enaver el lashon achraza, and the proof is from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu used the Lord of Avihu Kol Machan. They passed the word around that people should stop bringing. Yeah. So the woman was attempting to do it quietly. Presumably, she was not walking around and cavorting with these men in full view of everybody, or whoever the specific man was, or the like. But it becomes public. All right, the kina makes it public that everybody now knows what she has done. Va'avar Allah Baruch Kina is the same thing like Vayitzav Moshe V'Avihu Kol B'Machana, that it's going to now be made public. All right, let's just finish a few more. Says the more Shlagashama in Adam over aver elim ke nichnas by ruach shtos. The person only does an aver if he has a ruach shtos, the first one inside of him. Shnemar ish ki siste ishtoi. Right. If you look at the pasuk, it says the woman, is turning away from the husband, doing inappropriate things. But look at the word tista with the sin and read it tishta. Right. Tishta ksiv. Right. The sin could be read with a shin. In the Torah, there's no pentalach. Right. So it could be that went inside of her ruach shtos, so she thought it was okay to cavort around with another man, despite the fact that she was married. So the Gemara asks, how could it possibly be, right, that you're going to be memin and eid echad when it comes to the tumah aspect? I mean, normally required two eid for everything. How could it be eid echad would be sufficient? Says the Gemara, because there's already some basis. What's the basis? There was already a kina, there was already a stira. And now now you have one eight. It says that she was matam. Remember what we said, that even according, we said before, that even according to the mandam holds that you need to aid for kineni, to aid for stira. Even Rabbi Shua, who's so machmer, right? He doesn't. There's no ein l'davar safe problem with him. He always requires to aid him. But even him, when it comes to a situation where you have a ma'aser of tumah, even one aid is going to be sufficient for that. Why? Because you already have her glayim l'davar that she is on a bad track, and therefore even one A is going to be sufficient for that. So let's just finish. The Gemara says, now this part of it, that I mentioned already before, it's in looking at the Chumash, it'll be easier to see. What you'll see is that the Torah says, so that talks about stira. Then it says, what do you mean? Doesn't the kina take place before the stira? Why is the stira listed in the Torah before the kinoi? Says the Gemara the following. Says the Gemara, Amalei Rav Papa Abaya. So Rav Papa asked Abaya a question. When you look in the Chumash, you see that kina is written after stira. The tumah, right? It's written after stira and tumah udifsiva. And I don't understand how that could be. Shouldn't the process be reversed? So Amalei, so Abaya responded to him, V'avar. The pasuk that says about kina, it says V'avar alav ruach kinoi. What does it mean? V'avar ukvar avar. It already happened. In other words, this kina already took place beforehand. Says the more really? So it's written out of order, but you're saying it already happened. For avar love ruach kina, that means that he was already mekaner before. Says the more really? El me'ata v'avar lachem kol chalutz hachanami. Right there, at the end of Bamidbar, you see over there the Benegad Baruve Chad Shebanash. They want to go and stay in the land of Evar Yarden. They don't want to cross over. And the Moshe gets very angry, and the condition for them to be able to inherit the land on Evar Yarden, not to cross, is the fact that they're going to go fight with the Jewish people. Va'avar lachem kol chalutz. So if you want to say that va'avar lav kina means that the kina already took place before the stira. So let's say when it says va'avar lachem kol chalutz, that they already went to go fight. Obviously, it's a joke. It's sarcastic, right? They hadn't yet crossed the river. Of course, they didn't go yet fight. But if you want to say va'avar means in the past, so over here, va'avar should also mean in the past. They already did it, and obviously they didn't do it yet. Says the Gemara, El me'at va'avar lachem kol chalutz hachanami. The rest of the pasuk says, makes it very clear, that clearly that hadn't yet happened already. Right? So all right, I see we already have to stop. Okay, all right, we'll stop over here. Have a good chance.